Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Studio episodes of The Last Round, episode 66. Mike, we just got back this past Saturday from the Fox Studios in Los Angeles, California, covering the second press conference for the Deontay Wilder-Tyson Fury rematch. That was a pretty cool little experience over there. We got a couple interviews with a couple of different people that are out now, by the way. Right, Mike?
Yeah, the press conference itself was kind of timid. I thought we'd get some fireworks, really, with Deontay Wilder and Fury, only being, about 4 weeks away from fighting each other. So, did a long face-off. But apart from that, timid.
Yeah, it worked out, though. I mean, I know people wanted to see some controversy, but, I hope it delivers in the ring, at least, in terms of action. But thanks again, guys, for tuning in this week for episode 66 of In-Studio episodes. Like I mentioned right now, we have 4 previous episodes that we uploaded, I believe, yesterday with ESPN's Steve Kim, ESPN's Mark Kriegel, BT Sports, Tris Dixon, and professional featherweight, Isaac
Lowe,
Lowe, who's in Tyson Fury's camp. So those are all up if you guys want to go back and listen to those. There's some great content in there. But our guest of the week this week, we're lucky enough to get him on. We've been trying to get him on for quite a few weeks now, so luckily he was able to find some time in his schedule. He's a very busy man, arguably one of the most busiest persons in the fight game, not just in the boxing game, but in the MMA game, in the state of California, arguably the entire United States, because the California State Athletic Commission, it's essentially the biggest commission in the United States. We have the executive officer or executive director, however you want to call him, Andy Foster here. Thank you for joining us, Andy. We appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. As I mentioned, we appreciate your time and you coming in. I know we've been trying to coordinate with you for a couple of weeks, so thank you again. But, for our listeners who might not be familiar with who you are, because there's a lot of people who obviously, a lot of fight fans especially who know there's a regulatory agency in state government for, athletics, especially the fight game, and they know there's an athletic commission, but a lot of people don't know the people behind the scenes, like the people like you, the executive officer. Can you just kind of go through how you got into the position that you're in and the experience that you have and how you got there?
Well, sure. I don't know how far you want to go back, but I've been involved in combat sports pretty much my whole life. I used to train and did the whole thing. So I got kind of interested in it with the UFC when it came out in 1993. I was still in high school and I watched it and first time you're hooked, and so you're slowing down the moves and you on the VCR and you're trying to figure out how they work. And I'm from Georgia, so Jacare Cavalcante came to Atlanta, I started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu back before it was a thing. And I started doing that. And after a few years after I was training, I started promoting mixed martial arts fights, and I like that. And if you look back at the history of MMA and where we were at, Zuffa didn't own it at that time. Certainly not WME. It was just it was owned by a company called SEG, and they were smaller. And so, when it went off, I thought it was done. I thought that MMA or whatever you want to call it, NHB back then, I thought it was done because there were some comments made this is human cockfighting and stuff, and some politicians didn't really like it. And so I kind of thought it was over. So I started doing more boxing. during that time, like just training boxing, doing that. And I actually promoted a few boxing shows. So I got involved in that, and I did some amateur boxing. But then, like, MMA came back, I'm more of like a regulated form in Georgia and like sanctioning bodies, and it became legal again. So I started fighting in those, and then I turned pro, and then I got into the referee position, and I became the head referee of the Georgia Commission for the MMA. And then just sort of out of the blue, I got asked by the Secretary of State's office to be the executive director of the Georgia Commission. And I did that job for, like roughly 5 years. I don't know exactly, but then the California job came open, and and all that time before I got the Georgia Commission, I was training fighters at the gym and doing that type of stuff, both in boxing and MMA. Both I was competing myself and I was training, and I was in people's corner, and then I was the referee sometimes because it's a small world and especially back then. And then when the job came open in California, I came out here, and I got the job. A lot of interviews to get this job, a lot of interviews. But so I've been out here. So that's in a nutshell. That's my experience in this field.
Do you think it's important, or from a different perspective, how important is it to have, like, for example, like you just mentioned, you mentioned all your credentials, your resume that essentially prepared you for the job that you're in right now. Like you're a student of the fight game, obviously. Like you've been practicing it essentially for a good part of your life, for all your life. You've been a pro, you've been a referee. How important is it for somebody who wants to like work in, like a regulatory commission like that, especially somebody who wants to achieve status as a director, like in your position? How important is it to have the credentials like that?
And I'm just going to be frank about it. I don't know the answer to that question because I don't have the basis of not knowing of not having it, because I had it before I got here, so it was like something I came up with. I think it gives me a kind of an interesting perspective, because sometimes I see promoters' views, the trainer's view, the fighter's view, and sometimes that's good, and I suppose sometimes that's bad in the sense that, in the sense that sometimes I'm looking at it from a lot of different angles. Certainly, various regulatory issues that come up from time to time. But one of the things that we've done that I think is kind of on that front is more what I consider to be reasonable. I don't want to tell you wrong, I believe it was Francisco Vargas that a few years ago, like in 2015 or 2016, it was when he was going to fight Salito. He popped for just the minuscule clenbuterol issue, just a little bit. And I just got killed in the press, just killed for really no reason. And I went ahead and let him fight. We had plenty of time to get him tested and make sure he was clean. But, you're looking at it and you're looking at like, look, something's not right here. Something is not right here. Okay. And so I went ahead and let him fight. And then, there's that situation. It wasn't on my watch, but the same thing happened with Canelo Alvarez. And a lot of people don't know this. And I thought I would just share this I'm talking about Canelo with the clenbuterol issue when he had to have the fight postponed. I believe it was with Golovkin. A lot of people don't know this, but the World Anti-Doping Agency just came back and changed their standard on clenbuterol for fighters that have been in Mexico, or athletes that have been in Mexico. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. Are you guys aware of that? Because a lot of people aren't.
I think we had heard some rumblings about that, but we didn't know if that was already confirmed. So you're saying that it is confirmed already?
Yeah, it's a stakeholder notice. I'll be happy to send it to you. You can type in "WADA stakeholder notice clenbuterol" in Google. It'll pop right up. But basically, if they've been in Mexico and the fighters been in Mexico or whatever, and there's, we can verify that. The standard is basically 5 nanograms. Now, there's some caveats to that, and you can read it. But essentially, that to me that seems like a more reasonable approach. So on that same vein, we've come out with some new disciplinary guidelines, and it goes back to the whole idea of what is reasonable and what is fair for these athletes. Because look, we don't want dopers to fight. I'm sure you guys don't, as the media and the fans out there, they don't want dopers to fight. But at the same time, they don't want people that are innocent because look, you get labeled a doper, it's hard to come back from that.
Right.
And we live in a contaminated world, and this whole thing with contaminated supplements is a real thing. It's a real, legitimate thing. And our labs, especially the labs the state of California uses, UCLA and then Smyrtle over in Salt Lake, they can test at levels that we've never saw before. I mean, we can get down into the single-digit picograms now, when it used to be that we were talking in nanograms, and we were having a high confidence in nanograms. Now we're down into the picograms, and we're really starting to see. And there's a lot of things for the viewers out there. There's a thing, the SARMs, selective androgen receptor modulator. They're in a lot of supplements that are just at your nutrition store. Mm-hmm. A lot of them. And I think that's an interesting thing to just point out for anybody that's listening is you need to be careful if you're an athlete with those things because they're in so many things. And we had a stakeholder notice about that. But just to get back to your basic question, I mean that's one of the things that I've learned from some of my experiences is you have to be. I feel like you have to look at things in the whole picture and be, look, I try to be, and I'm not always this way because I have failures, but I try to be reasonable when I'm looking at things, especially when it comes to disciplinary issues, because you want to discipline a fighter, and I've disciplined them all the time, but if you're going to do that, you understand, I'm taking away somebody's right to make a living. Right. I'm taking away their right to do what they love. I'm taking that away from them for a while, and that's one of the hardest parts of the job.
So, since you brought up that topic about doping or any type of issues like that, one of the most recent, at least high profile, newsworthy instances that's happened was with Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. He was scheduled. I know it wasn't within your commission's purview. He wasn't fighting in California, but he was scheduled to fight in Las Vegas, so he was under the Nevada State Athletic Commission. And then they came to Hollywood. He was training at the Wild Card Gym, and they wanted to test him. I believe the VADA team wanted to test him, and he refused. His reasoning reportedly said that he hadn't signed the contract yet for the fight. And then, so obviously his promoter or the promoter for the event, Eddie Hearn in Matchroom Boxing, ended up moving the event to Phoenix. You as, obviously a major figure in the sport, especially in the regulatory side, what do you think about a situation like that?
Yeah, I think he should have took the test.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I don't really know. I know that when you don't take a test and a collector shows up, if you're an athlete wanting to fight in California, that's a failure.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, kind of the thing is, why wouldn't you take it? Now, again, I don't know the specifics, so I'm not going to comment specifically on that thing, but just in general,
mm-hmm.
But if Nevada, if he was interested to fight in Nevada, and I believe that he was, it was certainly being advertised that way and that type of thing. Certainly everybody knew about it. It would seem not just reasonable, but it would seem like they're doing their job by requesting advanced out of competition testing.
Even though reportedly he said that he didn't sign a contract for that bout yet against Daniel Jacobs, you don't think that has any type of backing to his stance in terms of refusing? Like if it happened within California and you received that news, and is there any state code in regards to that? Like, does a contract have to be signed for the fighter to be officially tested, or how does that work, at least in California?
The contract doesn't have to be signed. They just have to be licensed. And once a fighter's licensed, I can test them anytime I would choose to.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I can even, if they apply, I can even, before I grant it, I can request testing, because you don't want to issue a license to somebody who's doping, and again, I'm talking in just the way our process works, but yeah.
So is the state of Nevada the same way in terms of, I'm assuming they are, in terms of if you're licensed in their state, they can test you anytime they want?
I'm not totally familiar with all of their testing protocols. What I do remember about was like when Vanderlei Silva didn't when he avoided the test, when they tried to test him out of competition. And I don't remember exactly the specifics, but he didn't take the test, or he refused, or something. It actually went to court, in Superior Court, and I've read that decision, but it's been a long time ago. But essentially, the judge sided with the Nevada State Athletic Commission.
Okay, I gotcha. And then, in terms of, obviously in your experience, in your position, what's the more, I guess, I'm sure they have obviously their difficulties, but what's the more, difficult sport from your perspective, from your agency's perspective to regulate, in terms of issues or anything? Is it MMA or boxing? Especially because I bring that question up because obviously, you just touched on fighters being popped for things and stuff. And there was one thing recently, I know he's not a boxer, this is more of a boxing show, but John Jones had a hearing December 11th for, I can't remember exactly what, but we were reading that you found out that he had tested positive for, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was in August or September, but you found out after the fact. Can you speak on that situation?
Are you talking about when I let John Jones fight over here?
Yeah, I think it was UFC 232.
Yeah, there's a lot of fights. I can't remember. I know the last time I had John Jones, he fought. It was when they moved the show with a week to go.
Right.
Yeah, and he had really low levels of the M3 metabolite, which is not the parent compound of oral turinabol. It's a long-term metabolite. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty well documented. But what exactly do you want me to tell you about that I can? I mean, about that situation.
Well, I'm sure you've already been asked that question before, especially since it was a while back. But in terms of what was your mindset going through that? Because obviously, they switched it to Inglewood, California, and obviously they had to go through your agency, and you had to obviously sign off on it. But you're saying because it was a compound, like you looked at the results, so you were comfortable in letting him fight in the state.
Well, look, okay, so this is the best way I can explain this, so that you and everybody can understand. Okay, for one thing, John Jones had a license. Okay, he had a license here, so he didn't have to go through any kind of process. Okay, so he already had a license. So that's first and foremost. Okay, so we start with him having a license, and he was granted that license by the athletic commission itself. Okay? I grant 99.99% of the license. I think the athletic commission has granted 2 licenses in the last 2 years, and one of them is to John Jones or whatever. You know? Most of the time, I do it on their behalf. So we'll start there. Okay, so he has a license, but this is the most important piece of all of that. Is we'd already been through all this with John Jones the first time, because I fined John Jones $205,000. The commission upheld that fine, and the commission also upheld the suspension period that I gave out and I forget exactly what that suspension period was, but it was. I mean, it took him out of play for a while. So, but this is the most important thing. We had a big hearing, and Daniel Eichner from the Smyrna Lab, Salt Lake Lab, came and testified. So he was the one that ran the test. He was the one that gave the information to the commission, and he based our disciplinary stuff on basically on his testimony. It was him that run the results. It was his test. Everything about it was his. Well, when the thing popped again, I'm talking about the M3 metabolite,
Mm-hmm.
it was Daniel Eichner's test. He was the scientist that ran it. But the rationale for that and why we allowed him to fight was Daniel Eichner had sent a letter. Now, this is not a random scientist. This is the man who run the test. And in that letter, he said there's no evidence of new re-administration. And there's no performance-enhancing benefits and whatever. Something to that effect. But certainly the words, there is no new re-administration, there's no evidence of re-administration is the key point as to why we chose to do what we do. And by the way, I mean, if you go back and you look at the hearing in Nevada and you look at the different things and where we are now,
Mm-hmm.
and some of it was, I don't think Nevada could get their commission together in that short period of time, and I don't know all the specifics. What I do know is that he had a license here, and the scientist that we used to punish him the first time is now telling me this time, hey, he's okay. This is not the new. This is the same thing, and there's no evidence that he's done this again. And we had that, and but even with that, I still thought, there's something not right here. By the way, I had a bunch of other letters from scientists, but that one from the scientist who ran the test was the really most convincing one, because it was on his testimony that I find John Jones the largest fine this commission's ever given out.
Right.
So I still thought, there's something don't seem right here. And I called up Hunter and I said, yeah, I'm going to need another drug test. I need a clean drug test on John before we say yes.
Right.
He was like, well, Andy, it's like Saturday before Christmas or whatever. I was like, yeah, you'll figure it out. And they went and got a private jet and flew it and got John in it and went to the lab that I'm familiar with, and we got the results back. And I was like, man, he's clean.
Wow.
And it's like, I thought, there was nothing. So, essentially what I'm saying is, we put him in the VADA program.
Mm-hmm.
We did a lot of things on our side, but the bottom line is, John Jones has been tested more than any athlete probably in the history of mixed martial arts, and he's welcome to fight here in the future as long as he's a clean athlete, and he was, and we're he was punished for the M3. He was punished. He was the biggest fine.
Mm-hmm. He
sat out his time, and he's welcome to fight here again if he'd like to.
Andy, one of the major issues we have in all of combat sports now is trying to get people to fight at the their weight divisions. Can you just explain to us the new California 15% rehydration rule?
Sure. That's a regulation that's been it's in the promulgation phase. The commission's passed it. It'll take effect soon. Because the promulgation process takes a while. It has to go through various steps and various things. But the bottom line is the commission has passed it. It's going to happen. And basically it's on the second day weigh-in. We have second day weigh-ins for everybody in California. If you come in over 15% more than you were the day before, we're going to cancel that fight. Now that might seem extreme. Okay. For one thing, boxing don't have that many people. I got lots and lots of data. I think in 2019, I had 4 people that exceeded 15% in boxing out of a lot,
Right.
out of a whole lot of people. Okay. Now in MMA, it's more prevalent. Okay. But we have weight cutting on both sides. MMA is worse, but boxing's bad also. And the question that you have to ask and fans have to ask yourself is when does this become cheating?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We just spent 20 minutes talking about drugs and about various things and finding people for drugs. This is right under our nose. And more importantly, catching drugs is hard. Fixing neurological issues and trying to make this neurologically safer and make this sport safer, that's hard. We're getting hit in the head. This is guys cutting 20, 30 pounds in 24, 48 hours and putting it back on overnight to make a weight class that they never were except for 2 minutes of their life.
Mm-hmm.
It's not fair. And listen, the problem is, it's not so bad. It's bad, guys. It's bad.
Right.
But it's not so bad when both guys are doing it because it's like a race to the bottom and it just makes me scratch my head. This is an exercise in futility. And by the way, we do a lot of Skype ways, doing a lot of this stuff. I move guys up all the time. Did it this afternoon. So we're not going to do it at 35. We'll do it at 45. But, I say this to just let you know, this is an exercise in futility. We have these guys who will be the same weight the next day. And I got data for days that shows that. But here's the problem. Every now and then you get a guy who didn't get the memo.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know about it. And so I had a situation not too long ago where a guy weighed in, they both weighed in at 45 the next day. The one guy was like 71. And then the other guy was 49.
Wow.
I have a problem there.
Right.
And at that point, I think the weight cutting. Well, let me give you an example. What was the one that you guys know about that got me and Frank Espinoza was talking about it? Quigg and
Scott Quigg and Valdez.
Yes. Remember that? Quigg missed weight. You had to pay the fine.
Right.
But I would argue that Valdez, Valdez wanted to do it. He didn't have to do it. He didn't have to do the fight. But I think it makes it tough, whether Quigg missed on purpose or not, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that he missed weight. And when he rehydrated, he was much bigger. And even though Valdez rehydrated also up, he didn't rehydrate to as much as Quigg. He still won the fight, but he took damage in that fight. And these are the kind of things that we're trying to keep from happening.
Andy, in your opinion, would you like to see one governing body instead of each state governing their own, fighters and different sets of rules?
No, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't think that's a good idea, okay? Because it sounds kind of good, when you're thinking about it. But I don't know how everybody does it, by the way, but I like to sort of please understand, I can't know every fighter.
Right.
But I start to know the fighters because I go to the fights. And when I say know them, I watch them. I don't know them personally, but I watch them. They come across my desk. I will call and talk to them if I need to. Mm-hmm. How's your training going? This type of stuff. So I've got the biggest state. We got the most fights, but a lot of the same names keep coming across my desk. Some of the same guys. We had a show this weekend where I called a couple of the guys I was a bit concerned about. But having said all that, I've got my hands full knowing these people and knowing as many as I can and trying to keep up with it. Now I've got the most to keep up with, but it's really a busy job, and it keeps me and the staff busy trying to keep up with these people. By the way, I approve all the fights, all of them. So they all go through me, every one of them. So I'm looking at them. I'm trying to know the fighters, trying to remember them. If I don't know them, do I know the trainers? Is coming from a good camp? That type of stuff. And I try to imagine that on the national level.
Right.
I just don't see how it's possible. I suppose you could do. Anything could be done with if you're just going to be more generic about it. But you and I we all know, like, I'll give you an example. This weekend I approved a fight. This past weekend, one kid was 8-0, but like a lot of his wins were like from 7 of his 8 wins, I think, were from Mexico.
Right.
And like they were, you know, I'm not knocking Mexico fighters at all. I'm talking about this was the, you know, the sometimes they go down there to build a record, and it was one of the lower level competition.
Right.
And then the other guy was like 2-14, but you know, he had only been stopped, I think, once in his whole career. He was making it to decision or splits or majorities with like decent competition. Okay. So, you know, I talked to my referees, you know, sent out the stuff to the referees and like, you know, hey, you know, but I called the fighter. I talked to him. How's your training been going? All this. It was kind of funny. It was like, I've never been called by the commission before, but
yeah.
But he was originally from Pennsylvania, so I talked to Greg Serb about it, but too, because I was originally going to deny it, and then I thought about it, so we reduced it to 4, but it ended up being a split decision. The 8-0 fighter won, but it was a split. Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, to me, that's a reasonable bout, but you know, I'm not sure I would know. I wouldn't, you know, I don't know if I'd know to do all that stuff, and because I knew he could fight. It's just, you know, a lot of it comes down to, have you been training? And, you know, sometimes that call from the commission is really kind of, I don't want to say motivating factor, but it lets them know, hey, there's a regulatory body out here. We're a little, you know, you hadn't won in a long time. We're concerned. This is not like, you know, this is not a ball game you're throwing, so we may not be able to sanction you much longer if you don't want to put nothing in the fire where they have to win. I'm not saying that, but you need to show some effort, show some skill, and he certainly did, and he's welcome to fight here again.
Andy, you talked about, you know, that every fight that happens in California comes across your desk, and you give the final say, you approve or deny. What, if you can remember, what's the personal record of you denying? Because I mean, we're assuming that there's been a promoter, or whether it's big or small, they're trying to get a fight for a fighter, and they're submitting opponents to you, and you've looked over them. You're like, nope, this isn't. I'm not going to approve this. Has there been like a personal record that you can recall where you denied a consecutive amount of opponents for a fighter or a promoter, and until they finally got who they wanted?
I mean, I've got a lot of them, you know. I think like sometimes, like, I mean, so let's keep this in mind, okay? If you're dealing with high level fighters, okay, many times those come with sanctioning attached to them, with a sanctioning body. Okay, so if sanctioning body is like got a belt behind it, I'm not saying I don't look, but that's, you know, these people, you know, sort of like these people have earned the right to get a check at some point. You know, I'm talking about even if you're on the B side. So really, the ones I'm looking at is a lot of times what you have, especially the ones that you're looking at, is you have like a up and comer who a promoter is building.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk about those guys between about like 8-0 and 14-0. Okay. They're not good enough to have they're good, but they're not experienced enough yet to have sanctioning, but they're right on the cusp. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like, and then it's like, when they get up near that high, I've saw enough to where, you know, I'm looking and I'm like, look, guys, you're going to have to, and I'll give you an example. Serhi, I don't want to say his name wrong, but he's one of Tom Loeffler's guys. I think Abel trains him, and he's got like a 100% knockout ratio. Okay. He fought Tyrone Brunson sometime last year. And like, you know, I was telling Tom, I was like, before he got Tyrone, I was like, look, you you're going to need the same level of guys. Sir, he's going to have to. We're going to have to move him appropriately. Otherwise, you're going to have to. And so I think he fought for like the WBC Intercontinental. Don't want to tell you wrong. It's one of those, but he fought Tyrone for it, and he. I'm off of memory here, but he won. But I mean that's an up and comer, and that's somebody that I've watched, and that's kind of an example. But like guys like that, it's usually those guys that will get a lot of denials because you kind of know what's going to happen, and really at that point is this appropriate? Because as opposed to mixed martial arts, where the promoter has both sides of the card, they may have a favorite that they want. What you don't want to have in boxing is exploitation. Right. Okay, you don't want that. And I struggle because sometimes I know who's going to win. I'm sure you guys know who's going to win.
Right.
But the question is this reasonable? And sometimes, a lot of factors go into it, but, when you get those guys that they're building, you've got to really make sure that they're fighting opponents who, them guys have been stopped 4 and 5 times in a row. You've got to really kind of look at and see, because what are you doing to them? Because if they get stopped again, they're going to increase to like a BSI 6 or something like that, and they're not able to even fight here anymore. A boxing severity index score.
Right.
That's a tool I use to make approvals.
What did you look at, Andy, when you sanctioned the YouTube fighters Logan Paul and KSI?
Yeah, I mean, that was, I got a lot of questions about that. And to me, that wasn't that hard of a decision. I just watched their first fight. Now, look, this is something entirely different if we're talking about Logan Paul fighting somebody else. Okay, we're talking about him fighting the same guy he fought the first time, and it was a draw the first time. And so it's just, to me, it was like, I mean, somebody asked me, how do you know it's going to be competitive? I said, because I watched their first fight.
Right.
I don't like, and if you guys saw it, I thought it was competitive. I love that fight.
Right.
So I thought it was good for boxing. And I think it's good that the YouTube community is interested in it. And I think that people that listen to podcasts and stuff, I mean, I think it's good that we're trying to bring new people in to boxing. And so I liked that fight. I really did like that fight. It was one of my favorite fights last year.
So if for, hypothetically speaking, Andy, if you didn't have that first fight to look at in terms of making your decision, would you still have sanctioned it if they wanted to fight for the first time in California?
No.
Okay.
I mean, no. I mean, what am I going to do? They're two guys that they don't have that first fight, what am I going to sanction? Two guys that don't have no fights, or you know what I mean? Like,
no, right.
I mean, I would have sanctioned it as an amateur fight. They wanted to sanction it as a pro fight to get money, which was fine as long as they're fighting each other.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're passing their medical, they get the license or whatever. Getting the license is not that hard. It's who you're going to fight with the license.
Right.
Am I going to let you fight the WBC Intercontinental Champion? No.
Right.
I'll let you fight each other. You've already fought before.
Right.
Andy, for the pro license in California, do they have to go through a test? Do you go down to the gym and watch them spar?
Look, we have to get the debut, we have a pro trainer sign off on them. So, just throwing out examples like a Robert Garcia or Abel, or the list goes on and on.
Right.
But they have to pass all these medicals to get the license. incredible battery of medicals, and we've strengthened that up in the regulatory program. We're adding more things and all that. So we want to try to keep the fighters as healthy as we can. We got this new C3 Logics test we give them. It tracks their neurological baseline over time. Yeah, I mean, we have a pro trainer sign off that they can box. And, you know, we hope that they're going to be with them and stuff to help them. Yeah, it's a little bit difficult for me. I don't only say difficult. I think it would be impossible just with time constraints and everything for me to get to every pro debut fighter's gym in the state of California. It would be impossible. And so if we send inspectors, then you have to ask yourself this, like, what does my inspector know? And there's maybe some that absolutely know. Okay, I'm not saying that there wouldn't be. But let's say, what's my inspector know that his trainer doesn't know? Like, what are we doing? Like, you know. So I think it's better to have the trainer. Hey, this guy's ready to turn pro, and that's what we do.
So there's a lot of weight, at least for your agency, put on the pro trainers, especially if it's a high profile trainer like a Robert Garcia, and Abel Sanchez, or Freddie Roach. There's a lot of weight put on their opinion in terms of a pro debut.
Which, I mean, it's a requirement in the state. So yeah, there's lots of pro trainers. Those are three names that you threw out that are everybody knows, but there's quite a few. I don't think there's more than 100. I don't want to tell you wrong. There might be 70, but there's a lot of trainers in California. We have a large group of fighters, and it goes all the way up from Redding all the way down to San Diego. So there's a lot of gyms, but yes, there's a lot of weight put on their opinion.
Andy, who were some of your favorite fighters growing up, especially being in the fight game and training in it? Who were some of the fighters that you kind of admired or were fans of?
Well, in boxing, I certainly liked Evander Holyfield. I mean, I'm from Georgia.
Yeah, the real deal. Yeah.
So I liked him. I liked Oscar. But Oscar came around like right when I was like, he was fighting. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it was like I was just cheering. Like I was really big on Evander because he was from Georgia, and I thought he was a good for the sport, good person. Yeah, I really like now. I think this Deontay Wilder Tyson Fury kind of thing, and I mean, look, they're kind of symbiotic on each other. I think. I mean, in some ways, because I'm not sure either one by themselves will be able to achieve what they've done together.
Right.
Which is kind of, I feel like they've kind of reinvigorated the heavyweight division, at least in the United States.
What's your take on this whole especially with DAZN coming in as a streaming platform? What's your take on that in terms of viewership? Because for the longest time it was pay-per-view and then obviously network television, but now it seems like they're trying to pull it boxing and essentially MMA, like with Bellator, they're pulling him into the streaming side of things. What's your take on that whole situation?
Well, look, I mean, I think it's great for fans. I mean, you're getting incredible value that used to cost a lot of money, and you've got more content than you've ever had before. So I think that's great. And I think it's not just sports, but I think in general, a lot of these, like, I don't know what you'd call them, like content shows, like sitcoms and these type of things. You see a lot of that move into the streaming side, the rise of Netflix and all this. But like a lot of times people still want to watch sports live. Okay. So I think in that regard, it's kind of helped boxing in some respects, because boxing is a sport that people like to watch live. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I'm sure you guys know this, but boxing is not as big of a sport in the United States as it is in the rest of the world. Like, it's a pretty big sport in the rest of the world.
Right.
And I mean, it's not that it's not big here, but we have other sports in this country, but in many countries, boxing is a really big sport. And so the streaming side allows, I think, a lot of the content to be distributed through the internet. A lot of people can see it. I just hope DAZN is able to financially make it work, because I mean, it's an incredible deal. It's an incredible deal. I think the commission has like 5 or 6 subscriptions to it, or 7. I don't know how many. We got a lot of subscriptions to the Zone because we use it for watching fights and stuff, various things. But I mean, it's a tremendous value.
Right.
So I like that. But you got Disney in it with Mr. Aram with ESPN.
Right.
You've got Fox in it with TGB and with the PBC model and that type of thing. So you've got a lot of different content providers, and you've got Showtime doing their thing, and they're still in it. So yeah, I think the entertainment industry is kind of, in sports, is brought up in this. I think it's kind of in like a transition mode. And I think it's going through a change, and I think we're watching this change happen. And I know just from my own personal use, I switched from like cable to streaming for my home last year. And I know a lot of your listeners have probably done the same thing. If they're listening to a podcast, I bet they're streaming on their TV.
Right.
So the internet's changing, and I think the Zone is a wonderful addition to the model, and I hope that they're around, because this is a tremendous value for fans.
And you mentioned you touched on a couple promoters, Bob Aram, and all that stuff, PBC essentially. One major figure in the sport of boxing, at least in the fight game, who fans especially are very intrigued by, because he never gives interviews, he never comes into the public light. He's always behind the scenes, so nobody ever really sees him. Is Al Heyman? Have you ever met Al Heyman? And if you had, what's your take on him?
I've never met him.
Oh wow, really? Wow,
never met him. Not that I know of. I mean, right. I've never met him.
Has there ever been like an opportunity to like meet? And I mean, because I'm sure you met Bob Aram, you met De La Hoya, Eddie Hearn. But never Al Heyman? No. Wow. That's interesting.
I can't even say, and I think I saw him. Mm-hmm. I think I saw him one time in the back of Staples Center, I believe it was. But I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure.
Right.
So yeah, I've never one thing you can say about, you always have to gauge it kind of like this, though. I've never heard any of the fighters complain about Mr. Heyman.
Right.
Have you? I never have.
No, yeah, none of his clients. You're right. Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, Andy, we appreciate your time. We know we had you for a good 40 something minutes. And like I said, we appreciate you jumping on here on the last round this week as our special guest, especially as we've been trying to coordinate with you, get our schedules lined up for our last couple of weeks. But if there's anything you want to tell listeners, before we let you go here about your commission, about yourself, if there's anything you want to see in the future in the world of combat sports, go ahead. The floor is yours.
I mean, we want to just mention that, the state of California has the only boxer's pension fund. I would like to mention that. You fight, we're removing the break-in service requirement through regulation. So basically, if you fight 75 rounds in California, you're going to vest. Wow. I feel like that's a neat, pretty progressive policy that the state has. And I'm not saying it's some kind of grand amount of money, but a lot of the checks I see, it's just like when you turn 50, boxers can apply, and some checks are really, really big, but probably the average is maybe $16,000-$17,000. I'm not saying that's a grand amount of money, but it's money that nobody else is giving out.
Right.
And the state, the state provides it through ticket sales. So I feel like that's a pretty cool thing that the state does, and it's really rewarding. Finding the boxers and then giving it to them, because a lot of them didn't know it was coming.
Right.
And so there's sort of like money from heaven or something, and they're really pleased about that. So I like to tout that, because that's I feel like that's pretty good. I'll mention this quickly. I don't believe that weight cutting, neurological health, and performance enhancing drugs exist in a vacuum alone. Okay, I think in many times these things are connected issues. Okay, for example, a fighter might cut weight using a diuretic or a PED to maintain their strength, and that extra strength allows them to hit harder, which causes neurological injury to their opponent and these type of things. But they did it so that they could make the weight cut. I mean, that's an example, but I've seen this stuff over and over. I've heard it. Mr. Foster, I only did it because I needed to maintain my strength for the cut. I had to cut the weight. So I think really the lowest hanging fruit of those three things is the weight. And if we can get the weight right, I'm not saying we solve neurological health. I'm not saying we solve PEDs, but I'm saying that we can mitigate those two and at least reduce the number of those other two pieces of what I call the regulatory triangle that I focus on, if we can solve the weight, because the weight's low hanging fruit. All I need is a scale. So I guess I'll leave you with that.
One more thing that we do want to get your take on, just because you are a major figure, at least in the fight game and essentially in the athletic commission within the biggest state in the United States. Obviously, one of the most major athletes, not just in the United States but the world, just passed away in Kobe Bryant, tragically in a helicopter crash. Can you just give us your immediate reaction to that?
I was sick. I mean, I was saddened. And my thoughts and prayers go out to the family. I mean, obviously didn't know them personally, but it was just, it's like losing a hero. I mean, losing an American hero. Mm-hmm. And it's sad. And I mean, it's one of those moments where you will remember where you were for the rest of your life when you got that news.
Right. Yeah. I think there's a lot more people in this world who are sharing that opinion. He was a major sport figure, and not just a sports figure, but a major icon in American culture. But Mr. Foster, we appreciate you coming on here on the last round this week. You're more than welcome to come on anytime you want. Anytime you need to, talk to the fans and stuff like that, because we're out here boots on the ground, with these fans and trying to deliver content and different news tidbits and analysis to them. So anytime you want to come back on, you're more than welcome to.
Well, great, and look me up when we're at the fights again, so we can meet in person. That's great.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm sure you'll see us eventually. I'm sure we've been at multiple fights that you have been in. Mike, my partner right here is 6'3" and I'm 6'7", so you shouldn't miss us at all. So
okay, that's great.
But all right, Mr. Foster. Right. Well, you take care and you have a good rest of your night.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I think I might have a new favorite interview.
That was interesting, insightful. I liked the way that he was very straight and to the point. He didn't beat around the bush. And
I like that answers. A lot. I like that a lot. I know we did some pre-research on him. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we've seen interviews over the years and stuff, and obviously we're familiar with the Athletic Commission and him being in the sport for quite a few years in terms of the media side. But it's a breath of fresh air that somebody being in a position that he's in as the director of the commission is so candid in his answers. I think that regardless if you agree with his opinions or not, like as fans or whatever, you have to appreciate and respect that he's very straightforward. He is. He'll give you his opinion.
To me personally, that's what I like.
I think that's awesome.
Like you say, whether you agree with somebody or not, I would rather they gave me a straight answer than just, didn't give me an answer at all.
Right. So, let's see. Let's actually move on. I know we're running low on time here. So we'll just kind of quickly go over. Danny Garcia got the unanimous decision win over Irid Redkach this past Saturday in Brooklyn, New York, on Showtime from the Barclays Center. Real quickly, what did you think of that performance?
Not a great performance. I thought obviously he was a handpicked opponent in Redkach because he's looking for another southpaw opponent in the future in Manny Pacquiao or Errol Spence. I think it was one of those where I think he tried to knock him out, but he was kind of working on things at the same time, so he can get used to, the angles, the style, and, the counter punching of fighting a southpaw, because he's not fought many in his career so far.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't really fault him because they did announce Spence technically, and Spence did get hurt, so he has to stay busy. I don't think you can really fault him for fighting somebody like an Ivan Redkach, and you got to stay active. What he's supposed to do.
I see Spence is back out in the nightclubs though.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. I wish we had more time to talk about
that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Jarrett Hurd also got the unanimous decision win over Francisco Santana. Santana was down in round 10. I'm assuming this is going to get Hurd maybe a title shot now, or maybe he's going to get close to it after this. So
not a good performance for Hurd. I know obviously he's got a new trainer. He looked like he was trying to invest in a new style. Personally, I think it should have been further down on the card because it wasn't very good over 10 rounds. Francisco Santana was somebody that he, handpicked, who's actually a 147 fighter, and he fought him at a catch weight of 156. So I think, Hurd really should have got him out there. It looked more of a 10-round spar.
Right. Yeah, you're right. But, he got the W at the end, so it honestly goes on that record. And this Thursday, a rare Thursday fight event here in the States. The reason why, especially for our fans, our listeners all around the world, outside of the United States, especially in the UK, the reason why it's likely happening on Thursday, why it is because the Super Bowl of American football, which is like the finals, is happening this weekend in Miami, I believe, in Florida. So Matchroom Boxing, Eddie Hearn, who's promoting this DAZN card on Thursday, is trying to capitalize on that traffic that's going to be around that area. On Thursday, didn't you say it was like a man-made stadium or a man-made arena or something?
I think that's what I heard. It was something they put up ready for, obviously, Super Bowl weekend, because obviously you have concerts. There's a lot of big artists will be there on the Friday. Is there wrestling as well?
Is there? I don't know. Maybe.
I'm sure I heard somewhere they said something about there was wrestling on Friday.
Probably.
And then obviously the Super Bowl weekend, Saturday and Sunday.
I mean, it's smart. It's smart because you capitalize on the traffic that's there. You mentioned wrestling. Like, there's a lot of, every time they have their Super Bowl, which is their WrestleMania, there's a lot of smaller wrestling-related companies or those type of companies that set up events around that area, around that weekend or around that week, because there's a lot of their customer bases there. You know what I mean? So it's smart. It's smart. I mean, if there was I know there's podcast conventions. I think there was just one in LA. I should have told you about it. We should have went. But or stuff like that. Like, we would probably be around it. It's a natural place for us to be, in terms of our businesses and stuff like that. So this one's headlined by the YouTubers.
Not this time. They're not headlining.
Oh, they're not headlining.
Andrade is the headline, and they're actually further down on the card.
So Farmer and Joseph Diaz are headlining.
That's the co-main with Andrade against Luke Keeler.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, let's just start with Tevin Farmer and Joseph Diaz for the IBF Super Featherweight title. This is Joseph Diaz's second shot at a world title, right?
Gary Russell being the first.
After he lost to Gary Russell. Essentially, who do you got?
I think both of these, none of them are big power punchers. Joseph Diaz has 15 KOs in his 30 fights, and I think Tevin Farmer only has 4. I think Tevin Farmer may take it. I think it'll be a 12-round decision. I think it'll be a good fight. Both, technically slick boxers, like to move. I think Tevin Farmer's just a little bit too much for him.
Maybe. I'm actually going Diaz on this one. I think it's a tough fight. I don't think there's going to be fireworks like people expect because none of these guys are knockout artists. It might be a tactical fight. It most likely will be. But I think Diaz is going to take it. I think Golden Boy is going to get a title in their stable. I think they're going to do it. I think he's going to do it.
At last, it'd be nice to see. Been a local fighter for us, Southern California.
Yeah, but I'm excited for that fight. I'm probably more looking forward to that fight more than anything. And also, like you said, the headlining event fight is a WBO middleweight champion Demetrius Andrade goes up against Luke Keeler, obviously for the WBO middleweight title. Andrade's just trying to stay busy. He's in a tough spot because he doesn't really draw money. But he has a world title, so like all these other world champions like Canelo, Triple G, even like a Charlo or these other guys, Danny Jacobs, they don't really want to fight him because the payday's like not there for them. So he's in a really tough spot.
He needs a good performance, in my opinion. Obviously, he won the title when Billy George Saunders popped and was taken out of the fight. He's had underwhelming performances against Selecki and Arthur Akavov. So to me, I think he really needs to go in there and actually go for the knockout this time and actually, get Luke Keeler out of there. Because if he's shouting for big fights with, Golovkin, Canelo, and Jamal Charlo, then he needs to put in the performances where the fans demand it.
Yeah, I get it. So on that note, we'd like to give our thanks to Executive Director of the California State Athletic Commission, Andy Foster, for joining us this week on The Last Round. That was a great interview. I'm sure you can go back to it anytime you want, not just this week, but as the weeks and months go by. That was great content for our show and in general for the sport of boxing. So you can follow our show at The Last Round 12 on social media. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, share, Spotify, Stitcher, all that stuff. Anything else, Mike?
Don't forget to go back and look at the interviews we did over the weekend with Mark Kriegel, Steve Kim, Isaac Lowe, and Tris Dixon.
All right. On that note, from my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.